In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the elements of the fantasy genre. So, what makes a book fantasy? Well, every fantasy story has some blend of the elements that are below and that we're going to talk about. It's important to understand what these elements are in order to understand and really enjoy your fantasy genre. Great fantasy stories use a combination of these elements. However, a story needs to possess only one of these features in order to be classified as fantasy. They don't have to have all of them. So the first element of fantasy is magic. Magic is a key central thing to most fantasy stories. It is the most basic element in the genre and what draws us into the story. The second one is they have certain character types. Right? In a fantasy, the characters will range from things like reluctant heroes to heroines to mythical beasts, animals that take on human characteristics. Most main characters usually find a supporting character that is either the sidekick or a mentor to them to help them throughout their quest or journey. Strong characters are what helps us connect and cheer the story on. In our storytelling, an archetype we're going to talk about later, is a character who represents a specific set of universal, recognizable behaviors. Some of the main types of archetypes or characters in a fantasy are listed below. Of course, we know we'll have a protagonist and antagonist, right? Our protagonist is our most important character in the story. He or she is usually just an ordinary person like us who has to do some extraordinary things. For us to cheer them on, the key is that they're not perfect, that they have flaws. Then we have the antagonist in the story, which is that character that creates the conflict for the main character. The best stories are when the antagonist is believable and not just pure evil. And then we have some others like the reluctant hero or heroine. In a fantasy, protagonists often feel like an outsider in his or her world. He may feel powerless to control or change what's happening to their lives. Most of the time, the protagonist is the reluctant hero. Reluctant means they don't want to be, meaning they don't want to follow this call to action, but they will eventually rise to the occasion. By stepping out of their world or comfort zone and following the quest, they solve who they are and their place in the society. But other popular characters that are found in fantasy, which are archetypes, are also like the loyal sidekick, a group of journey or hunting companions, evil or dark figures, an outcast, a warrior, a child or an orphan, a creator, a caregiver, a mentor, the joker or the trickster, a magician, a ruler like a king, a rebel, a lover, a seductress, an ally, which is a friend, a damsel in distress, and there are tons more. We will talk about character archetypes more in depth later. Fantasy must also have a quest, which is a part of the plot. Quests are found in most books in the fantasy genre. Quests are included when the hero must travel over a long time or distance, hoping to find something that is hard to attain or someone who is even missing. There are obstacles and enemies to overcome and sometimes even death. The hero may or may not get or achieve the goal. Quests are usually really about self-discovery, learning something about themselves. They are mostly a symbol for the challenges facing ordinary people in their daily lives. If you look down at these images, they show you a typical hero's journey. Where here they start out here in the ordinary world, right? Then they get a call to adventure. Most of the time they try to refuse it because they don't want it. Then they get the help of a mentor. They develop allies or friends along the way and enemies as well. Then they start to transform into the person they want to become. They have some sort of ordeal or challenge they have to face. There's usually a reward of some kind. And then they get to their road back to the return to their home. All right. And at the end, they return back to their ordinary world. This is also seen in this diagram as well. All right. Same thing, call to an adventure. They cross over that threshold between the known world and the unknown. This is usually when you go into the fantasy setting. There's the helper, the mentor. They're tempted. They have challenges along the way. This is a change, a revelation, and where they transform. And then they come back to the return back home. Another element that fantasy fiction has is the setting. The setting in a fantasy is more than just the time or the place. It also includes the magical powers, as well as unnatural creatures that are part of that place. Setting is who and what are around them. It's defined by its own set of magical and creature laws. The imaginary world sets the stage for the quest and the battle between good and evil. A lot of times you'll see portals, all right, where characters will travel through a passageway from the real world to a fantastic one. It can also transport the protagonist somewhere in time. Portals are a part of the setting and often part of the quest to get back home. Then we have universal themes. Most of the time with these themes or our life lessons, it's a must-have in our fantasy story, but we don't see it early on. We usually have to wait towards closer to the middle or towards the end before we see that theme developing. They're woven into the story as like a metaphor and developed through the character's actions. They reveal important lessons that the character must learn in order to make decisions and ultimately grow. The most basic idea is good versus evil. There's always a good guy trying to fight for what is right against the powerful force of a bad guy. Other themes might include things like love overcoming everything, the power of friendship, or perseverance in the face of danger. Today in class, we will be reading Chapter 2 of The Wizard of Oz. You need to make sure that you read Chapter 2. We have the copy of the text. There are the questions that you will need to answer inserted into the page, and you will also have the option of listening to it, the audio, using the timestamp.